Thank you for everything. I gave my husband a respectful nod, handed him the divorce papers, and walked out of the house. He always prioritized work over everything else and never bothered with household chores. Without me, he'd surely struggle. Let him see just how helpless he is. My name is Susan. I quit my job right after we got married to become a homemaker. My husband, Robert, was my former boss, renowned for his exceptional work ethic. From the moment I started working under Robert, he was always supportive, offering advice and eventually inviting me out for private dinners. Our relationship began in secret, but we made it public when we decided to get married. When I announced our engagement, many of my female colleagues were envious. Becoming a homemaker was Robert's idea. However, once our married life began, Robert's attitude shifted. You just lounge around at home and still get to eat. You're really lucky. Who do you think provides for this lifestyle? You should be grateful to me, he'd say. If I tried to go out on a weekday, he'd look displeased. Going out for lunch while I'm working? Who do you think earns the money for that lunch? Think about it, he'd remark. I started to feel reluctant to go out, fearing Robert's reaction, and I began to stay home more. Is this my life now, just waiting for Robert to come home? I couldn't stand it. I felt a strong need for change, so I decided to work outside the home again. But Robert wouldn't hear of it. You want to work. Is my salary not enough for you? He demanded. That's not it. I tried to explain desperately. I feel suffocated staying at home all the time. You think of work as just a breather? Are you taking it lightly? He accused, but I knew that if I backed down, nothing would change. I pleaded with Robert, and after much persuasion, he finally agreed to let me work part-time on the condition that I wouldn't neglect the household chores. Returning to work after so long was nerve-wracking, but it was also refreshing. I worked hard to ensure Robert had no complaints about the housework after my part-time job. It was tough at first, but gradually, I found my rhythm. Around that time, Robert's mother passed away. I informed my part-time job of the sad news and asked for some time off, which they kindly granted. I shuttled back and forth between Robert's family home and ours, preparing for the funeral and taking care of my father-in-law. After the funeral, Robert told me, "You only need to visit my family home every other day. Daily cleaning and laundry aren't necessary, right? Just prepare meals that my dad can easily heat up." He seemed worried that his needs would be neglected if I visited his family home daily. When I told Robert that continuing to care for his father would jeopardize my part-time job, he responded with irritation. It doesn't matter if 1 or 2 employees are absent, right? Just reduce your working days. If they complain, quit. It's not like you're earning much. It's just a breather for you. Reluctantly, I reduced my working days, but I felt guilty for constantly asking for flexibility. I wished my father-in-law could take care of himself, but he was adamant that household chores were a woman's job. He wouldn't do any cleaning or laundry, and he was picky about food. "This is too salty," or "I want something else," were common complaints. Because of this, I often returned home late from his place. One day, my father-in-law refused to eat the pot roast 2 days in a row, so I had to prepare another meal, making me late. When I finally got home, Robert was already there, and he was furious. "You're late. What were you doing? Where's my dinner?" he shouted. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "Father-in-law wanted something different, so I had to make another meal. I'll serve dinner right away." I served Robert the pot roast I had brought back. He looked at it with disdain. "What's this? You promised to take care of the house as usual, right? If this happens again, you'll have to quit your part-time job." "Wait a minute," I said, my frustration rising. "I was late because I went to your family home, not because of my part-time job." Inaki snapped. "You're stretched thin because of that part-time job. Don't ever make me wait again after I come home from work." I knew arguing wouldn't change his mind, but I couldn't accept it. I continued juggling household chores, caring for my father-in-law, and managing my part-time job, sacrificing sleep to keep up. Then, one day, I received an unexpected call from my mom. "Susan, your dad's been diagnosed with a severe illness and needs to be hospitalized," she said, her voice trembling. I learned that Dad's cancer was advanced and beyond treatment. I wanted to visit him immediately, but Robert was unsympathetic. "Visiting him won't change anything. Focus on our home." Reluctantly, I took early leaves from my part-time job to visit Dad. Half a year later, he passed away. While helping my devastated mom with the funeral preparations, I informed Robert about the funeral date. His response was chilling. "You'll be back before I return from work, right? I don't want to wait for dinner again." "You're attending the funeral too, right?" I asked, hoping for some support. "Why would I? It's a weekday and I have work," he replied coldly. "My dad just passed away. Can't you take paid leave?" I pleaded. "In theory, yes, but I have important meetings. It's not that simple." "It should be a priority to bid farewell to a family member. When your mom passed, I took several days off and adjusted my work schedule for you." Robert scoffed. "Don't compare your part-time job to mine. I have responsibilities you wouldn't understand. I can't just take time off." After more pleading, he finally relented. "Fine. I'll take a few hours off for the funeral then," he said, forcibly ending the conversation. With the funeral preparations, I visited my family home more often, took more days off from work, and reduced my visits to my father-in-law to every third day. Consequently, I could only manage household chores every third day. Robert grew more irritable. "You've been slacking off with the chores. You haven't cleaned in 2 days." "I was helping mom all day 2 days ago and visited father-in-law yesterday," I explained, desperate to make him understand. "Excuses again. Your mom has been managing the house for years. Why does she need so much help now?" "After Dad's passing, she's too devastated to do anything. I want to be there for her." Robert dismissed her grief. "She's just being weak. Your dad's illness wasn't sudden. She should have been prepared." "This is why I say woman." "How can you say that?" I interrupted, my voice shaking with anger. "Even if she knew, losing a lifelong partner is devastating. Can't you understand her feelings? I'm saying she should face reality. Your dad should have planned better. Leaving without preparing his wife is irresponsible." I stared at him horrified. "How can you speak of my family like that? Don't you have any respect for them?" "What's there to respect?" Robert sneered. "Just because they're older? That's naive thinking." His words cut deep, and something snapped inside me. "How can you say that? Not just about my mom, but also about my dad, who passed away after a long illness." That was the moment I decided to cut ties with Robert. I couldn't talk to him anymore. Just being in the same room with him made my skin crawl. I began to secretly prepare to leave the house, using the funeral preparations as a cover. Quietly, I started moving my belongings to my parents' home. It was difficult to tell my grieving mom about the current situation, but I couldn't bear it any longer. Robert's attitude had become unbearable, and I wanted to move back home. When I finally confided in my mom, she comforted me, saying, "You've done well so far. If Susan wants to come back, I'd be more than happy. It won't be lonely here with you." "Thank you, Mom," I replied, feeling a sense of relief. It's better to free yourself from Robert and find new happiness than to force a marriage. With her words of encouragement, I felt reassured and continued my preparations to leave. I kept my emotions in check, flawlessly handling household chores and taking care of my father-in-law. It was just a little longer to endure. As long as I maintained the housework, Robert didn't complain, and we avoided unnecessary conversations. On the day of the funeral, after briefly paying his respects, Robert returned to work without much of a goodbye. "Robert, you're really going back to work?" My mom asked, disappointed. Even though she knew about our situation, she had hoped he would take a break from work during this time. "Apparently, that's what he thinks is appropriate," I said indifferently. Hearing my comment, my mom replied, "Well, I guess there's nothing we can do." We both felt reassured that our decision to divorce was the right one. After the funeral, Robert returned from work as usual. "I'm back," he announced. "Welcome home," I replied curtly. "Welcome home?" "That's it. I took time off work for the funeral because of you." "You should thank me," he demanded. "Thank you," I said, forcing the words out. "Yes, your family interfered with my work." "Now say it." Robert sat arrogantly on the sofa, waiting for my response. I bowed slightly and said, "Thank you for everything so far." "What did you just say? So far? What do you mean?" he asked, confused. Without hesitation, I handed Robert the divorce papers. "Divorce papers? What's this about?" "It means exactly what it says. I want a divorce," I replied calmly. Robert burst into laughter. "You think you can live without my money? If you have time for jokes, make dinner." "I'm serious. I'm leaving to live with my mom." "She's okay with it." I've saved some money from my part-time job, and they're considering offering me a full-time position. A full-time job? For someone as inefficient as you, he scoffed. Goodbye, I said, handing the stunned Robert the divorce papers before leaving with just one bag. When I arrived at my parents' house, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I spent the evening talking with my mom about my hardships and sharing memories of my dad. Robert kept contacting me, but I ignored all his messages. His words were still condescending. How can a wife leave her husband like that? Apologize and come back, and I'll forgive you this time. Ignoring him was the right choice. Robert never came to my parents' house. His pride wouldn't allow it. Thanks to that, my mom and I lived peacefully. A few days later, I realized I had left something at the house and decided to sneak back while Robert was at work. When I walked in, the place was a disaster. Garbage and dust covered every surface. Fast food wrappers littered the kitchen, and wrinkled clothes were strewn across the floor. It was clear Robert hadn't done any housework. Concerned, I wondered how his dad was managing. As I passed by Robert's family home, I saw his dad talking with a caretaker at the entrance. Apparently, there had been complaints from neighbors about a foul smell coming from his trash-filled room. If things don't improve, you'll need to leave immediately, the caretaker warned. I understand. I'll go to my son's place, his dad replied. I couldn't help but think, if his dad moves in, it'll just be another man who can't do housework, and the trash will pile up even more. Later, I heard from neighbors that Robert's father had packed his bags and tried to move in with Robert. However, Robert refused, leading to a big argument. Their dispute over living arrangements became the talk of the neighborhood, and eventually, Robert had to compromise. They ended up living together, but as expected, Robert's house turned into a trash heap, causing a stench that bothered the neighbors. Robert, now going to work in wrinkled and dirty shirts, quickly lost respect from those around him. There were even rumors of him being demoted at work. One day, Robert came to my parents' house to apologize. Susan, I was wrong, he began, but then, in a condescending tone, added, Are you satisfied now? I apologized. Now fix your attitude and come back. It was clear Robert hadn't changed at all. What exactly did you reflect on? I asked calmly. What? Why are you acting so high and mighty? You didn't just give a shallow apology, did you? I pressed. Robert was speechless. Please go home. I have no intention of returning to that house. But without you, the house is a mess, and there's my dad to take care of, he pleaded. You just want me back to take care of you and your dad, right? Ah well. You might think you're competent at work, but if you can't manage your own life, you're worse than a child. What? How dare you talk to your husband like that? Not husband, ex-husband. We're getting a divorce, so we're strangers now. Wait, I don't want a divorce. Shut up, I am not your servant. You always look down on homemakers. Men like you, stuck in the past and domineering, should just be buried in your trash-filled houses. Stay away from me, you arrogant jerk. I shouted at Robert, then locked the door behind him. When I turned around, my mom was clapping. Well done, she said with a smile. After that, I started the divorce mediation process. Fortunately, the offer for a full-time position progressed smoothly, and it seemed I could earn enough to live comfortably with my mom. My mom, who had been down after losing my dad, was gradually regaining her spirits now that I was back. Life with just the two of us became fulfilling and joyful. According to my lawyer, Robert and his dad are still living in their trash-filled house, now known in the neighborhood as the useless father-son duo. They're the subject of gossip. Robert, unable to sleep properly because of the mess, is always sleep-deprived. As a result, he made a significant mistake at work and was forced to resign. Without the means to hire a housekeeper, their future looks bleak. Looking back, I feel foolish for trying so hard to please Robert. I'm grateful to have escaped a life of constant endurance. From now on, I'll live my life to the fullest.